Hello everyone, and welcome to an episode of I keep putting off commentary videos I've been planning for a while by getting distracted and deciding to make a video about something else. Ever since the last Disney movie video I did, I listened to a couple Aly and AJ songs and realized that they had their own movie. So for this video, I'm going to talk about the movie Cowbells, which I've never seen before until just recently. From what I remember about the promos, I assumed it was about two rich girls who work on a dairy farm. Well, I was on the right track, but still very wrong. Now, what I typically do is talk about the general themes of the movie, but I think for once, I'm going to do what everyone else does and give a little play-by-play commentary instead. So the movie starts off when Taylor, played by Alyson and Michalka, is taking her driver's test, and honestly, she's doing well enough, but she does a few things that make me extremely nervous. She seems to get easily distracted, and I'm not sure if that's the type of person I would feel comfortable sharing a car with, and her driving instructor feels the same way.
The truth of the matter is, while you handled the car quite confidently, you seem to have a very real problem staying focused.
So Taylor's pretty convinced he's going to give her a failing grade and decides if she's going to fail, the best course of action is to continue asking for him specifically to teach her, and he pretty much nopes out of that conversation and decides to pass her. Meanwhile, her father, Reed Callum, who is in charge of this dairy factory and distribution center, is talking to one of his business buddies named Bob. And Bob's like, "Yo, you work so hard, you've done so much for the company, you deserve a vacation. I hooked you up with a really nice getaway. Just go, man, you haven't had a day off in years." And he's like, "I don't know, man, my youngest daughter's big event is coming up and she might want me to be there." And his remark is,
"She's a teenage girl, Reed. Daddy is the last thing on her mind."
So, somewhere between this movie and about 5 years ago, movies were all about this plot line, the father who hasn't moved on yet still sees his daughter as his little girl, and there's this tension where he wants to spend quality time with her while she's trying to become an independent woman. And it's just so funny to see him go, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe it is okay for me to go on vacation." At any rate, Taylor comes back home and her car is sporting some really nice decal.
Hey, congratulations! What is this?
Now, the decal is definitely bearing on his mind, but the most important thing this movie wants to communicate is that Taylor and her sister Courtney are a little tunnel-visioned.
Where's Corrine?
We dropped her at the market.
You expect her to take a taxi home with all those groceries?
So Taylor realizes that she goofed up and volunteers to go get Corinne, who, if you haven't guessed, is his personal assistant in charge of taking care of the house while he's away at work managing his company. But he decides it'll work itself out. Now, the subject of the decal does come up, and it turns out Taylor ordered it in advance. It cost about $200, but get this.
Which, with the 12% discount and the $4.95 cash rebate, means it only really cost $171.05.
That's right. She's a math whiz. She can calculate percentages faster than I can type it all out in a calculator. Bob seems pretty impressed too. Well, since Taylor got her license and I'm pretty sure Mr. Callum doesn't want her borrowing his car all the time, he decides to unveil his present.
It looks exactly like the one Mom's driving in all the old pictures.
It is your mother's old car. I had Ralph down at the dairy return it to mint condition.
The problem is, it's a stick shift. So he's hooking up Taylor with someone to teach her how to properly shift gears so she doesn't tear up the transmission. And the person he chose is not an adult, but a teenage boy named Jackson. "Hey, Dad, not going to question your judgment here, but you're sticking two teenagers together. You don't think hormones will in any way at all interfere with the learning process? That and an adult might have a tad more patience." He does not look too thrilled to teach her, and naturally, of course, she's not doing too well. For this, I think I'm going to have to deduct one dad point.
"I told you, first is up and to the left. What's the problem?"
I'm trying, okay? Quit hollering. Sorry. This is hopeless.
And that's the trouble with people like you. Rich, pampered chicks that glide through life without a clue. Do you have any idea what it means to actually work at something?
Whoa, dude. Ease up. Her ability to drive manual isn't an indication of her character. If you couldn't tell, I think this guy is being way too judgmental. She's clearly frustrated with herself. I highly doubt anyone who isn't used to a stick shift is going to get it first try. But Jackson takes a deep breath and decides to try again, but less harshly, and she starts to get it. However, things are cut short because he wants to check in on Martha, one of the cows currently in labor. Taylor's curious and wants to make sure that Martha's okay too, but she forgets to put the car in park, and it rolls into a nearby body of water. Oops. So Taylor wants to make it up to him, but she has no way to pay for it on her own, and it's very clear her dad is not happy.
It's gonna cost me how much?
$800 for the recovery and $2,000 for the repairs.
All because you didn't set the parking brake. Your carelessness, your spending, it's gotta stop.
Oh, but the carelessness doesn't stop.
I can navigate a computer better than a bunch of geeks, but I can't work this stupid can opener.
You might want to try plugging it in.
And so she does, and then they put the contents onto a gas stove burner, get distracted by a phone call, and decide now is the perfect time to go for a drive. And then they come back to the fire department at their home. Luckily, the damage isn't too bad, but their dad is having a field day. So the girls are willing to do what it takes to make this up, so their dad decides that while he's on vacation, they're going to work full shifts at the factory to learn a thing or two about the real world. He gets them up early, tells them that they're going to be responsible for driving themselves to work every day, clocking in, doing time, and doing the things they want to do after they get home. What I find interesting is that they could just as easily not show up, but yet they do, and that already tells me they're at least willing to do their best. Now, of course, they'd prefer not working the factory lines.
Courtney's a star computer geek. If you need supplies, online shopping is her specialty.
Oh, plus Taylor is a total math head. She can figure out sale prices better than anybody.
They do make good cases for each other. They're absolutely trying to shirk line work, but at the very least, they recognize their strengths and how they can use them to add value to the company. Honestly, I could see Courtney as an IT consultant, and Taylor could work in the accounting office, no problem. However, Dad wants them to be humbled, so you can guess what they're doing now, right? Just so I understand, she's taking this stack of dairy containers, pulling them off one by one, and then restacking them inside the machine? Why? Am I missing something here? Anyway, Courtney decides it would be funny to take a picture of Taylor while she's in uniform, and the resulting squabble lands her cell phone inside of one of the dairy containers. Their coworker is understandably upset.
Well, this is great. Now, what are we supposed to do? Scrap the whole run? How could the two of you be so careless?
Now, every time these girls cause trouble, they're usually very quick to take accountability, and I really like that. They do what they can to mitigate the repercussions, but if they're capable of fixing the problem, they'll do it. And Taylor means well. She really doesn't want to be an inconvenience or cause trouble for all these people. So she suddenly realizes she can just call her sister's phone, extract it, and now they only have to waste one bucket.
And how do you suppose I make up for the 4 minutes of lost production time?
I'm sorry, what? Let me just rant for a second here. 4 minutes? Get over yourself. Should they have had their cell phone on the production line? No. Were they careless? Yes. He could have had a meaningful conversation about actions and their consequences or continued production and told them that their manager would talk to them later about their work attitude. But instead, he chose to draw the line at lost production time? Just push the button and move on. Standing there criticizing them is just going to waste you more time. Save it for later. That is the least concerning part of what just happened here. And at the very least, Taylor at least provides a solution for how to get back on track.
If you ramp it up by 15 seconds for 16 minutes, then you'll regain your lost time and be back on schedule.
Ever the math whiz. Sure hope that comes into play later. Well, if you thought that guy was a real treat, it gets better. And by better, I mean it gets worse.
This is a tad awkward.
Why are all these adults just staring at them? What is their problem?
Courtney, Taylor, what are you doing here?
Then they meet this character, Mr. Perez. Apparently he's like their second father, so they explain to him why they're there, and everything starts to make sense to him. And you know, I think it's overdue for me to award a dad point for trying to teach his daughters about responsibility, but then I'm gonna have to deduct one because of this.
Where are your lunches?
There isn't a caterer?
Well, until you can take that up with your father, you'll have to rely on our machines.
I like his reaction. He laughs at the juvenile nature of the question, but his words imply that he sees the merit of the question posed. So, for second dad, I award 1 dad point. But for Mr. Callum, he's on thin ice. You'd think that on their very first day when he woke them up, that maybe he'd remember to, I don't know, make time to tell them that they'd have to pack their own lunches. Seems like an important detail you forgot to mention if you ask me. So I hereby deduct 1 dad point. Not much else happens here, except they have this folk song singing thing. I guess it's part of some new initiative Mr. Callum's trying to build morale within his workers. And everyone seems to really be getting into it. Even the girls, which is pretty amazing to me because I'd be doing anything just to eat my lunch in peace and pretend I was not there.
All right, if anybody wants to come up here and join us, now's your chance.
Can we do backup?
Thanks anyway, but this band's for real working folk.
That is so needlessly rude. Instead of calling your band cringy, these girls are excited and want to be a part of it. And they're totally fine with just being backup singers. Do you have to be such a jerk about it? Hey, come on, second dad. You aren't gonna do anything? I hereby deduct 1 dad point from your total. So even though these girls are trying to work even harder, things just get worse. Even when they say they'll clean up their own mess when they slip on the wet floor, not one person helps. There isn't even an adult who would totally help the moment they're done laughing at you. Like, I get it. You don't like that they're there, but they are trying and they are working. Why are the adults in this movie so heartless? And then we get this scene where all the adults are picking up their paychecks at the end of the day, and these girls have never worked a job before. They don't realize how paychecks work.
Do you have one for us, Melvin?
Believe it or not, my darlings, you don't get paid unless you work an entire week.
I don't really know how to feel about this conversation. On the one hand, they are overall very pleasant to each other, and he seems amused by their ignorance, but something about the way he talks to them feels a little condescending. Just explain to them that their hours get recorded and sent to a payroll office at the end of the week. They don't understand how it works, but that's not an excuse to treat them like they're stupid, you know? But I will never not laugh at his reaction to this.
Night, Melvin. I'm so happy to see you're still around.
There's 2 ways to interpret this. Either way, Taylor doesn't mean anything by it. She's genuinely happy to see he's still working with the company, but he's either assuming that they think he is so old he should have passed away by now, or even more likely, he just learned that he probably would have been fired a really long time ago, except her dad decided not to. Outside, Jackson is delivering milk to the company. Taylor tells him that she'll stop by later with a check for his car repairs, and she looks really excited when he nonchalantly said that, yeah, sure, it'll work for him. So I sense that Taylor kind of likes him, but when Courtney says,
He is so gonna be your new boyfriend.
Really? He's hot.
And wait and live with my sister.
I thought, that's a bit reaching. But then I saw this. This boy takes 5 minutes to decide on a shirt. Yep, he's definitely into her. But in a tragic turn of events that hits home a little too hard, Taylor accidentally falls asleep right after getting all dolled up. I feel really bad for her. Plus, she fell asleep wearing makeup. Now, where our story really takes off is when everyone is heckling Melvin because he wrote them all bad checks. And as the only 2 people directly connected to their boss, the adults in the room decide they want to ask the girls about the situation.
Where's your phone? How come our checks bounced? Yeah, where's our money?
Wait, shh, please, quiet.
Putting aside how wild it is for all these adults to demand answers from teenagers, it would seem the company doesn't have any money, and the girls are just as perplexed as everyone else. Only Bob seems to have any real answers.
I just got off the phone with Nelson Partridge at the bank. Apparently your father took more than luggage on his trip.
It was then I realized who the villain of the movie was. By now, it's pretty obvious what's happening. Bob totally set up Mr. Callum to look like the bad guy and used his time away on vacation to take all the company assets and run. They don't spend very long deducing that for themselves. The girls find out pretty quick, which I'm grateful for, especially since Bob does indeed run with the money and we don't see him for the rest of the movie. It's set up a little obviously, and it's super on the nose. Well, what's this photo of Dad doing in the trash can? Guess that means Bob is my least favorite uncle. Oh yeah, I didn't mention this, but Bob insists that the girls call him uncle. I have no idea why, because he's not actually their uncle. So now the company doesn't have any money and nobody's getting paid. The people left in charge in Callum's place are practically begging the workers to keep working until they finish their production cycle and finish the orders with the accounts they've made deals with. Assuming they get paid after the deliveries are made, I would naturally believe they would just take a hit on profits and prioritize paying their workers and giving back pay as well. But You know, understandably, that doesn't translate too well.
Do you think my landlord cares if our inventory goes bad?
The reality is, most of us live paycheck to paycheck. I'm as loyal as anyone, but if there's no future here, we want to know that now.
All very fair points. This is a hard ask, but Taylor has an idea. At first, no one wants to listen to her even speak in the first place, but Mr. Perez insists that everyone gives her a chance. So, I am giving him back 1 dad point. So Taylor asks if she can find a way to reimburse their paychecks if they'd be willing to keep working for the company. The response?
How? By selling your solid gold sports car?
Or auctioning off your collection of designer handbags.
Anyway, since when do you care what happens to us?
We don't need your pretty honey. We need answers.
Honestly, amidst all the rude insinuations, I can see their point. Anything Taylor does, however well meant, is only a temporary solution. I mean, I'm still of the opinion that once the accounts are settled, it'll just be the usual cycle, but with far less profit, and that profit is something the workers never see anyway. After all, Bob is gone. They genuinely just need 1 paycheck reimbursed for things to go back to normal. So maybe a temporary solution isn't all that bad. However, I can also see if there's no future with the company, it's a little ridiculous to ask these people to stay. But the people in charge seem pretty sure that things will go back on track after the accounts are cleared. Honestly, what I'm saying is the workers have every right to be worried. I'm just a little disappointed the way they're mocking this girl for at least trying. I think that's been the theme of the movie so far. Girl tries a thing she's never done before or encounters a concept she's never known about, gets talked down to, or ridiculed.
You'd never even be working here if your father didn't force you.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? You probably wouldn't be here if you didn't need money either. So get over yourself. Like, maybe encourage the attitudes and behaviors you want to see instead of making these rash criticisms that will just foster resentment from even trying in the first place. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm with them on this issue, but the way the adults have acted so far haven't exactly fostered a work environment that I'd tolerate. It's a wonder she even cares about these people at all with the way they've treated her. But whatever. She cuts a check for 20 grand and everyone's checks are reimbursed. Also, I counted about 19-ish people in that room. If I round that up to say 20 and assume they all worked a 40-hour week, they all get roughly paid about $25 per hour. That's impressive. Mr. Callum pays his workers more than Amazon. Well, where did all that money come from, you might ask? Well, as you might remember, Courtney has a big birthday party coming up and she's throwing a cotillion with a couple other rich girls. So before he left, Mr. Callum left her some money and told her to stick to a budget. So far, Courtney has been spending a lot of her time planning expenses and decorations and asking out a foreign exchange student to accompany for the spotlight dance. And as you could probably guess, suddenly having 20 grand disappear from her budget does not make her happy.
I don't get it. How could you do this to me?
We really didn't have any other choice.
Yes, we did. It's my party budget, my money.
You heard them. If the dairy goes under, they might lose their houses.
Yeah, but we're only kids. Why should it be up to us to fix everybody's problems?
That is a spectacularly good point. I mean, I definitely admire the decisions Taylor is making since her dad isn't around to fix things, but as the movie goes on, it gets progressively more difficult to watch them make these desperate attempts to make ends meet at the company. Like, is there seriously no asset protection plan? Some type of insurance or fraud protection? Point aside though, Courtney is meant to sound a little selfish. The only thing she can see is that her sister had the best 16th birthday, and now hers is going to go down in history as the absolute worst.
My party's wrecked. Everybody will still remember yours is the best.
So yeah, there's that bit of jealousy going on there, which is a setup for her character arc a little later. For now though, Taylor doesn't really have anyone else to turn to, so she tries to apologize for falling asleep on her date, and of course he forgives her, but only when she makes fun of herself for not being used to hard work.
The whole working thing wiped me out.
Well, considering how foreign it must have been for you, surprised your body didn't go into shock.
Who knows? Maybe it did.
I guess you could call that flirting? I'm not really feeling it, but the point is, of all the characters that are quick to get over themselves, Jackson is outdoing all the adults. So I shall award him 1 dad point. Wait, hold on. 1 Jackson point? Never mind, scratch that. Let's just give him a A for effort and move on. Back at work, Courtney is still so mad at Taylor she ends up quitting, but not before she accidentally changes the expiration date to the day of the cotillion, which means that all the product being labeled is due to expire that very same weekend. And everyone's so focused on the company being practically bankrupt that no one catches the mistake. Back at the house, Corrine notices that Courtney came home early and they have a nice little heart-to-heart.
Anything we need to talk about?
Miss Mom.
It doesn't seem fair, does it?
Whenever me and Taylor were fighting, she was the only one who could get us back together.
She was that way with everybody. Your father used to call her his secret weapon. And you know why? Because she had compassion and she had perspective. She knew better than anybody that her good life was just a happy accident.
I like this perspective. Too often, people fail to recognize that there's an element of luck involved with becoming famous or financially successful. Let's be real. If all it really took was hard work, we wouldn't have nearly as many people out there living paycheck to paycheck. So this is a very refreshing way of saying, count your blessings. It's not condescending, it's not trying to make her feel bad for taking her situation for granted. She's simply praising Courtney's mom for her humility and calling it a positive trait to aspire to. I like that. Oh hey, that thing I said earlier about rewarding the behavior you want to see? How about that? Corrine, you've outdone all the other adults in this movie too. For that, I award you the Surrogate Parent Award. Give yourself a round of applause. You've earned it. Back at the dairy, which is not nearly as fun but far more accurate than saying back at the ranch, there are still a few financial snags. To put it simply, in order to fill the orders on their accounts, they're gonna need more supply, and supply is an expense they don't have money to cover. So Taylor decides to sell her mom's car to Ralph in order to bail out the company. So he buys it from her. But he's not especially made of money, so he can't actually pay the full value of the car, which, fair enough, but this is so painful to watch. I'm just thinking to myself, when will this end? Well, we got another 20 minutes of movie left, and we still haven't addressed the looming disaster in the distance. But in the calm before the storm, Courtney realizes she'd rather do right by her sister, the factory workers, and her father by pitching in the last $5,000 of her party budget and selling her party dress to help give one last financial push to help cover expenses. The factory cycle ends successfully. Everyone holds a celebration party for meeting their quota, and they hold the party in Courtney's honor, and she's about to have her spotlight dance when suddenly Ralph shows up and he's like, "Hey guys, our accounts are really mad at us for trying to sell them expired product. Somehow we've managed to label the wrong date on all these lids, and I think we're screwed for real this time."
We have to start a whole new run from scratch or lose at least 14 major accounts.
Is this movie done piling on the bad news yet?
I mean, even if everybody here works, we don't have the manpower for an all-inventory run. We'd have to get every machine going double time. We'd need people unloading and reloading the fleet of trucks.
This is it. This is the moment. The girls have time management and superpower math skills. This is their time to shine.
Unless you've got 25 extra bodies, it's impossible.
Okay, way to steal the moment, Ralph. Surely Taylor has a solution, right? Actually, the answer is no. I'm going to spoil the ending in about 2 sentences. Courtney goes to the cotillion she's no longer a part of and begs the attendees to help, which is incredibly painful to watch because it's just highly unrealistic to believe any of them would be interested to help out. The 2 girls show up to work empty-handed, but then Dad swoops in at the last minute and brings the manpower needed to get things running again because he came home early from vacation to surprise Courtney at her cotillion and overheard her plea for help. "Mr. Callum, I know I've been hard on you, but it's only because I know your potential. So, I'm gonna penalize you another dad point for being out of reach and having literally no other way than by phone to contact you in a location that has no cell service. But then, I'm going to award you 5 dad points for coming to the rescue. But I might deduct 1 more, just 'cause I feel like it." So honestly, this movie wasn't quite what I expected. In all honesty, the girls did take their situation for granted, but they are filled with good intent, and I think everyone in this movie was too critical of them far too quickly. These girls actually put in effort to try and do something outside their comfort zone, and were immediately met with a lot of hostility, and I don't think that's very fair. Sure, there was some nuance here and there. The adults were right to call out Taylor's naivete. Some situations just can't be patchworked by a little bit of sacrifice. If it weren't for the account deadline being nearby and guaranteed pay after the fact, I doubt she'd have been able to keep the whole thing stable. But I still think the adults were just so needlessly harsh to these girls who are just trying to prove that they can be responsible if they apply themselves. If they came in copying an attitude, maybe it would be called for. But aside from making some honest mistakes and just being ignorant of how things work, they didn't really do anything wrong. I mean, on purpose. But no one wanted to have any real conversation with them about consequences for negligence. They just found it easier to get mad at them and leave it at that, which I think is a terrible example to set for two adolescents who you want to teach responsibility to. I think the dad coming in and setting things right was a nice touch. It really showed that he preferred the company of his family than some country club vacation spot. But I also felt like the way they built up these girls to be these smart whiz kids with numbers and computers, I felt really robbed that they didn't figure out some incredibly ingenious way to figure out how to make the system better or more efficient. At least enough to temporarily increase productivity to fill in the gap of 25 people. Not to say they'd permanently end up pushing the employees past what they're comfortable with, but, you know, finding more time-efficient ways to get the job done. I also think it's crazy that Reed didn't have some sort of backup plan to rescue the account in some way, you know? Because at the end of the movie, he does the books and he's like, well, it'll just be like when we first started. We'll make profit again eventually, but we're going to have to tighten the budget until then. And I'm like, are you serious? No insurance for theft whatsoever. I mean, they don't have to say that everything will return to how it was before he left, but at least give me some assurance that if something happens down the road, your employees aren't going to be desperate for answers again. That aside, I think the movie did an okay job of illustrating the gravity of the situation, but the execution of how they handled it left a bit to be desired. On the one hand, it did work out. The girls managed to get the company moving until the company got paid by their accounts, but on the other, the desperation Band-Aid solutions were never going to last long, and they could have just as easily failed. Again, I feel a bit robbed that the girls didn't use their talents to come up with some way to make ends meet. Taylor said that if you need supplies, Courtney's very good at finding deals, but we never got that payoff. And Taylor knows how to manipulate time, and she's really good with numbers. If she was able to draw up some timeline that said, this is what our accounts are expected to pay us, if we divvy up the cost of expenses, yada yada, and keep making smart decisions with buying supplies, we'll be in the clear by next weekend. And then make the financial sacrifices so they're not asking for employees to work for free. I get the movie wants to add tension, and it did a good job of that. But man, it was just hurt and pain right up until Dad just came in and fixed everything last minute. Maybe that's just me though. At any rate, it's a decent watch. I wouldn't say it's a fun movie. It's not wacky or anything like Read It and Weep, but there's a bit of heart in the movie. So before I sign off, I award Cowbells needs more cowbell out of 10. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review, and I'll see you next time. So until then, stay tuned.